I'm Turk Strongman and Thuranki Ramaturaka. Thank you for selecting this video on your big splash and the quest for immortality. Before I continue, subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Activate this channel's notification bell feature if you haven't. Give this video a thumb up if you haven't, just in case you forget later. Comment courteously below. Your big splash and the quest for immortality. What the heck? Well, I just recently, earlier today in fact, uploaded a video called Making Your Big Splash. The thumbnail's text says, Your Big Splash. So I guess this is an extension. A sequel, I suppose. But let's take a different point of departure here. Let's follow another path along these lines, okay? It is quite natural, I believe, for somebody to want to make an impact, make a difference, maybe be remembered. I've heard it said about the being remembered thing, that a person dies two deaths. One when the body dies, and the other, the second one, when the last person says his name for the last time. Last person who's going to say his name says it. That's the second death. I've heard that. It was in a movie. I thought it was interesting. But, it has a limited perspective on affairs. But it's interesting. The spirit of it is catchy and points to some meaningful things. All right. But a person, it's normal for somebody to want to be remembered, have posterity, have done something that lasts longer than the physical body on this earth. Maybe have won a trophy and it's recorded. Records are there. So-and-so did such and such. That was a couple centuries ago. Nice to be thought of like that, right? I think it's normal. It runs into some questions over motive. Yeah. But it's kind of a normal thing, right? At what point? Well, let's say this applies to you, what I've said now. Applies to you, and it probably does. I think very few. I think you'd be one of the very few if this had no truth value to you at all. Well, anyway. All right. At what point does that leave off and quest for immortality, a desire for immortality, a feeling of immortality start for you? What the steps are in between, the various, how one phases slowly into the other, I don't know. I know these two kind of like ends of the thing, and I think there is a gray area where one phases slowly into the other. But somewhere in there, if we don't know what all those steps are, let's kind of just pretend they're not there. And there is a point at which one blends into the other or turns into the other. I'm just asking asking you to consider the existence, at least to an equal measure, as this desire to make a splash. there must be this other too. I want you to consider that quest for immortality. Maybe that's less recognized by you. Well, it doesn't seem to be very sensory world based. Well, no, it's not. More of an idea. But is it there? Maybe you didn't know it, or maybe you did know it. I tell you what takes some of the burden off making such a big splash. And that is to claim your immortality. I think that it might be the case that deep down inside we have this. At least most of us have at least a notion that there ought to be something that lasts, no matter what it is, no matter how fine of a particle it is. Something immortal going on in here, somewhere, somehow. It has an intuitively true ring to it. Some will completely be oblivious to it. But they certainly go about affairs in life, most such, trying to make a pretty big splash. And I'm just wondering, what's the inner drive, regardless of whether they're aware of it? There's something inner going on. I suggest realizing that I mean, there is such a thing as true selfhood, which is that. The real self, the true self, yeah. At some point, I think that's for us all, for each one of us, there comes a flash of recognition of such a thing maybe actually existing. And I think the more that is realized and manifested individually, maybe the less there is such a striving for making a big splash. Although making a big splash might happen coincidentally, not as a sheer chance thing, but I mean coinciding with. But I think there should come about less of such a big attempt, because there's some identification with the false self structure. It's diminishing. It should be under these conditions. So, if you're not aware of your own quest for immortality and the availability of it in your consciousness, it's realizing and manifesting universally. If you want to say objectively, well then consider the things you're doing in this world with a kind of a notion that hopefully something will make a big splash. Think of that and see if it doesn't smack of a little bit of a desire or a belief in something, or a desire for a notion of something about you that lasts. It's worth considering. thumb up, subscribe, get notified, comment courteously. What else is there? Thank you for selecting this video on your big splash on the quest for immortality. I'm Turk Strawman at Thrangji Ramataraka. Go forth and multiply. Be well.